I was ready to go, and I reached out my hand. And the principal, who was my guide, an old friend, said, "Oh no, you can't touch him unless you marry him." And I said, "I'm sorry, it's too big a price to pay." I went from there to Jerusalem, and I was standing in line in the bank trying to change some money. And in front of me, there was one black hat after another black hat. These are the Haredi. And they were one after another after another. And I kept saying, "Bavakasha, please, please." They didn't hear me. And finally, I looked at my hands and I said, "I give a push." And you should see what happened. I touched them. And they opened a path. Not for me, but they were afraid that I would touch them. And so I learned the power of my two hands to break this kind of violation of my identity. That was one of the ways I learned how it comes together here. So, I see the clock has run out.
It's my fault.
I don't want to run yet. The clock has run out. There are lots more pictures to see. I don't know if this part is run. I want to thank Jacob, who's been my wonderful audiovisual assistant, and Brian, who is the audiovisual person from the Women's National Democratic Club, and saw to it that all the equipment was set up, and pointed to the fact that not only can you get the book here, you're getting it at a price that you can't get it on the internet or anyplace else. I'd just be delighted if you read it and you wanted to think about it and talk to me about it and contact me about it. I'd be glad to tell you we have a DVD going that's covering this whole program, and it will be covering the photographs as well. And I'm sure that the Women's National Democratic Club will make the DVD available to anyone who wants to obtain it. And I promise you that there's much more in the book than I was able to talk about today. And I think you're going to find yourself as intrigued as I was by the way all of these things play out in the contemporary world. I have to say that chapter on Siberia, which I didn't get into here, I'm just going to say 2 words about it. No, a sentence. Siberia is a society of anomy and anonymity. It's destructive, particularly of women, because the intention of Siberia is to destroy identity. And over several hundred years, it has succeeded in doing that in a horrible way. Women are violated in every way. There's no protection of anything. Girl babies barely survive. It's a society of anonymity. Nobody knows their identity. They don't know who they are or where they came from. And it's to me, it was the most unimaginable horror to study Siberia and the human element in Siberia. It was the greatest violence. But then I had to pick myself up. And that's when I started writing about the Celts in Europe. Yeah?
Could you be specific about what the problems were for women in Siberia? What specifically was so terrible?
Oh, well, yeah. Everybody got there because they were put there because they were a threat. Way back in the 17th century, 18th century. They were a threat. They had to be put away. And there was no law or law enforcement, and then of course the gulags, where people almost had to forget their identity because that would be used in torturing them also. And women were few and far between, and at one point one of the czars offered to Russian serfs a sum of money, not very much, for each of their sisters or daughters that they sent to Siberia in order to provide women to civilize the place. I mean, can you imagine selling your sister or selling money to go to Siberia? So this is how women were devalued too. And the horror of it, it escapes you if you just look at the landscape. If you look at the fact that there's no employment, widespread alcoholism, that babies are born with fetal alcohol syndrome, and girls are subjected to rape, incest rape, from a very early age. And they go to think that this is the norm, this is okay, this is the way things are. And in the book I have a case study that is very painful to me because this was a girl I tried to work with who was adopted at the age of 9 by very nice American parents. And it was almost hopeless from the time she became an adolescent. But it's in here. That's the way. It's a destruction, total destruction of identity.
What happened to her? You still not. What happened to her? What happened?
She's 19 years old now, and her adoptive parents are still struggling to make sure that she goes to college. They've put out tremendous efforts and money. Instead, she took up at the age of 14 with a boy who's a sociopath. He's totally asocial. And now that she's 19, she's spending most of her nights with him. He lives with his mother and 2 siblings. All 3 kids were from different fathers. And he controls her, and she likes them.
Could you explain what happened to her in Siberia? You said something terrible happened to her in Siberia.
Oh, yeah.
What
Yeah.
happened?
She witnessed her father killing her grandfather. She was out and about at the age of 4 or 5 in the Siberian winters without a jacket. Nobody was looking after her. Her mother had become alcoholic, and she had 5 kids. She didn't really tend to them. And she said, well, it was a happy life because nobody came after me. I could just do what I wanted. And she had a brother who bullied her. Well, that's the way boys are. And so besides seeing her father kill his father, she also was there when her mother was beaten on the head, the hatchet, and found her mother in a pool of blood on the floor. And her mother was taken to the hospital, and because of her age, she was too young to go to the hospital, but she could go to the funeral. And she was chosen as the youngest daughter to kiss her mother's corpse. This is just some of the horror that was part of her life. She was a premature baby. She wasn't given much chance of survival. She was in an incubator in Children's House for the first 4 or 5 months. And then her mother got pregnant again and had a little brother who was a prototypical case of fetal alcoholism. She wound up in an orphanage. And that's where she was adopted by an American couple. So that's really the short version of it. Yeah.
I was very happy to hear you talk about violence about women. And I'm from the Congo here, and I don't know if you didn't mention it because you have not been in there in the Congo, and if you are aware of the situation that's been going on in the Eastern Congo about rape, which is very similar to what you've been talking about in Siberia. My surprise most of the time here is when I meet people and I ask them if they are aware of what's going on in the Congo and the rape that they are subjecting the women by armed men, a lot of the time I have the sense that people don't want to really talk about it, but I feel like in the highest level here of the decision, they're very aware of what's going on there, especially the violence toward women and children, and talking about the kind of trauma that they have women raped in front of their family and their kids. They have them watch. And some of the women, they make them eat their kids, like the armed men are killing. So I'm sometimes shocked to the silence somehow that I sense here in America, where I say, so you don't know about what's going on in the Congo, and I see they talk about Syria, they talk about India, they talk.
No, I do have that in the book as well, because I got one of the most.
Excuse me, there's a tornado watch for this area. This is Anna Fisher.
Hi, sorry I'm late, I apologize, but I just thought you guys should wind this up.
Yeah, and Ronan, thank you so much. This is, you don't need to put this in a garbage bag. This is a mug from the, American. And